Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of ILLN Opinion Plus, a weekly series airing on Fridays. This is a space for our opinions, where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. Today, we're joined by Beatriz Valdez, Deputy Director of Illinois CASA. Welcome, Beatriz. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're excited to have you, especially as our first guest. So let's kind of just jump right in and start talking about CASA. CASA stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates. Can you talk a little about CASA's mission and the way that this organization operates?
Yeah, so Illinois CASA operates under a larger umbrella. We are obviously the state arm of CASA, but there's a national organization obviously above us. And then below Illinois CASA, I guess if you look at it that way, there's 31 local programs that we support in Illinois. And we typically provide support to the programs, so the 31 local programs, but along with them, our mission obviously is to ensure that court-appointed volunteer advocacy is provided to youth in Illinois that are in the foster care system.
And what's that screening process like for a potential volunteer?
So there's subtle differences, depending on the program that you're in or that you apply through. But overall, the general screening process entails, obviously, you have to be 21 years of age. You have to be able to pass a background check, obviously. And then there's at least a 30-hour training. It can be more depending on the program that you apply through, because some of our programs obviously add additional training, but everybody goes through the National CASA core curriculum, which is 30 hours. And then obviously after that, you may have, before going through the training, you may have an interview. It could be a phone interview. It can be an in-person interview. Obviously, we're doing a lot of virtual right now because of COVID. So there's more flexibility. So that's typically what it is. And the training typically lasts around 4 weeks, depending, but that's the average. I mean, again, programs can structure it a little bit differently, but overall, that's what it would look like.
Got it. So CASA has expressed that diversity, inclusion, and equity are core values that they're committed to. How are these values implemented into the work you do, and why is that important?
So Illinois CASA actually just this past year, 2021, the board of Illinois CASA adopted that diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. And we did that obviously intentionally because we wanted to make sure that everybody within the network and outside of the network is aware that we're, very intentional in the diversity in, first of all, in our board and also within the staff members. And if you look at the composition of the board throughout the years, it's definitely changed. And we're very committed to making that much more resembling those that we serve, which is the population of youth and care in Illinois. The other thing that we've done at Illinois CASA is put together an equity task force. That's what we are currently called, but it's been around for a while, even before my time. It was previously called a diversity task force, but we renamed it just because we felt equity was more of resounding to the values of Illinois CASA in terms of what we're wanting to do. And it's a group of directors throughout the network and also other staff members that are wanting to kind of bring forward to the network 31 local programs and everybody within the program, obviously volunteers included, just making it very much more front and center in terms of everything that Illinois CASA does. And with that, we're thinking about trainings that we're going to be doing, additional trainings that we're going to be doing on, diversity and inclusion. There's a component already within the National CASA curriculum on cultural competency. We just don't feel that that's enough. So the group has wanted to kind of bring that forth and bolster our training so that our volunteers are really prepared to really work with any and all, families that they may encounter in the advocacy that they do. The other thing that we recently did, and it's actually just been effective January 1st, is we made some changes to the CASA statute. So before that, there was no mention of having to be 21 years of age, having to pass a background check. It was very general. We've made it very specific. The other thing that we added was the cultural competency piece. So it's not only part of the curriculum that you have to go through, but it's statute. Now you have to have this in order to be a volunteer. So that's something that I think speaks to just how dedicated we are and committed to the advocacy and the diversity, equity, inclusion issues within the advocacy that we do. And it really, for us, it's everything. It's how do we speak to families? How do you train volunteers so that they can be much more responsive and sensitive to the differences between families that they're encountering? And also, just how do you speak to a volunteer? What kind of volunteers do you want to let into the organization that really embody the values of Illinois CASA or just CASA in general? So it's really in everything. We feel that it's in everything that we do, and we really are trying to be that intentional about it. The other thing, one last thing in terms of what we're doing is recruitment for us has historically been a struggle in terms of recruiting diverse volunteers. And again, because we're trying to make sure that it's from top to bottom, that diversity is being reflected, that recruitment is a big piece as well. So we're helping the local programs to really kind of like maybe target, obviously, diverse populations and how to attract that population and how to make it a much more, I guess, appealing to that population, because I think sometimes traditionally it hasn't been something that maybe the Latinx community or just African Americans have been attracted to. And I think it might be in the messaging. So we're trying to have that messaging be much more inclusive.
Now that it feels like as a society, diversity and inclusion is a little bit more talked about openly, do you feel like you are getting more of that diverse people trying to apply for these spots?
I definitely, throughout the years and much more recently, we are getting more volunteers of color, but unfortunately, it's still not enough. For us, it's something that, again, we're trying very much intentionally to target that population. It's gotten better throughout the years, but we're nowhere where we need to be in terms of serving all of the youth in Illinois.
And this might be kind of touching on what we just talked about, but what's one of the biggest obstacles this organization faces in serving these underrepresented communities?
There's always a lack of volunteers. That's always been kind of like the theme, the recurring issue is that we don't have enough volunteers. Currently, at this point in time in Illinois, CASA programs throughout the state of Illinois serve about a third of the youth in care. And so that's nowhere near we want to be. And the statistics show that if you have a CASA assigned to a youth, they're much more likely to go home sooner, be reunified with their families sooner. Things just get settled much more quickly, and things get decided much more quickly in court. And instead of lingering, for years in court, because you have a dedicated person who really understands this single individual, the single child, and the family dynamics. So that's one of the things that we try to obviously pride ourselves in, but we don't have the volunteers. So that's always been like the struggle between, will we ever have enough volunteers? I don't think that we can ever have enough volunteers. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of youth that would benefit from a CASA volunteer.
How does CASA kind of decide which children are represented with a volunteer?
So again, that's a kind of a loaded question because it really depends. So we are appointed, or the CASAs are appointed by a judge. Typically, there's typically an order appointing a CASA program and then a CASA volunteer to that specific case. So it varies throughout the state, and that's something that we're trying to also bring more uniformity to, because there's, at Northern Illinois, you might have, 100% of the kids in that county, let's say, maybe, and just give you an example, King County, 100% represented by a CASA program. However, if you go down south, that's not the case, or even Central Illinois, that's not the case, just because, again, there's not the number of volunteers that we have or the capacity that it's necessary. And sometimes judges select based on, and other parties too, not just the judge, but mostly judges will decide these are the types of cases where I feel like the CASA would be most beneficial to me. And typically it's, those high risk cases. So we're typically assigned to the higher risk cases because the judges really value that information. They know that they can't have a CASA on every case. So they're going to pick those cases where they really feel like, maybe even like nonverbal children, for example, where they feel like a second set of eyes would be beneficial to provide the court with that information.
You've worked with CASA for a few years now, and you even were working in the foster care system before that. Can you talk a little bit about your personal background?
Yeah, so I actually started working just outside right out of college in the child welfare system in Cook County. And that was definitely an eye-opening experience for me. And I kind of have stayed there because one of the things that really struck me is just that sometimes the system can really do more harm than good for specific families, especially families of color. I think that's why I'm so committed to the work that CASA does and why I feel like, we need to have more diverse volunteers and just have volunteers, period, on every single case, is because trauma can really be just, tripled, doubled, when you have someone that's well-intentioned but misguided, engaging with families in a way that causes long-term trauma, sometimes more trauma than the actual, abuse or neglect that was experienced. So that's really why I think stuck around for so long and really wanted to make a difference in terms of, bringing that issue to, awareness of others and just awareness within the network and within the child welfare system, period.
For someone who'd like to support this cause and maybe they feel like they don't have enough time or it's too much of a like a big commitment for them, are there other ways to get involved with CASA?
So you can definitely obviously support your local program if you don't have the time that you may need to be a CASA volunteers, because it does take, some dedication from you. We say an average of 10 hours a month, but it really depends on the case. It can be a little bit less than that. It can be more than that. But definitely, obviously, donating, getting involved with any fundraising efforts that are being made at the local program level, supporting and letting your legislators know about CASA and that that's important for you so that they can also continue to support the local programs throughout Illinois.
So there's other ways.
Yes, there's definitely other ways that don't take up, too much time.
Do you have any resources that you want to share with our viewers?
So just wanted to let the viewers know that Illinois CASA actually has a plethora of, trainings that we offer mostly for volunteers and staff, but, sometimes just for caregivers in general of youth and care who are maybe going through additional stress especially during COVID, that has really heightened things for, caregivers and youth in general. We've really done a lot of things on education. So we have like an education section on our website as well. And definitely we can connect you, anybody, that's watching today that's interested in becoming a CASA volunteer, we can connect them with their local program and hopefully, get them to get involved with CASA. We're also doing virtual trainings. That's something that, most of the CASA programs are kind of playing with. They're doing kind of a mixture of that. So I think that that's also something to be aware of so that people can get involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for being our first guest on ILLN Opinion Plus.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me again.
Of course. Join us next time for another episode. For more information about our discussion today, check out our web story on illlatinonews.com and follow us on Twitter at ILLatinonews. I'm Annabelle Rocha with ILLN Opinion Plus. See you next time.